over Ethiopia and had 6,500 workers. Then he lost it all. Came home to Israel this month with $200 to his name. But for Menashe Levy, that was the least of his problems. He had spent 4.5 years in Ethiopian prisons without ever having been convicted of a crime. His case went all the way up to the desk of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who personally called Ethiopia's Prime Minister and secured his release. Senior international affairs correspondent Owen Alterman sat down with him, imprisoned, attacked, and suddenly released. Let's take a look.
A simple stroll along the sea in Jaffa, but for Menashe Levy, the end of a long and searing journey. 12 years ago, he was here, in the bustling streets of Ethiopia's capital. 4 years ago, here, in the tough conditions of an Ethiopian prison. And now here, a free man who went to prison for years for crimes he says he didn't commit. Addis Ababa, 2007. Ethiopia is on the cusp of an economic boom. Levy, a building contractor in Israel, tries his luck in Ethiopia and succeeds.
I make a company, road and building construction. That my company was a big company, 6,500 Ethiopian, and I built a lot of main road in Ethiopia.
There were parades for the projects and ribbons cut, but then charges of 3 crimes, a trial Levy and his supporters say was unfair. Levy suspects masterminded by his competitors. Even before the trial was completed, Levy was sent to prison.
I never commit any crime. Not only I never commit nothing crime, even they put me in prison 4 years without showing one evidence against me.
The Ethiopian embassy in Israel did not respond to a request for comment. Conditions in prison were tough and much worse. A man from Sudan imprisoned with Levy, convicted for beating an Israeli passenger on an Ethiopian Airlines flight. One day, Levy was in prison, playing backgammon.
I play sheshbesh with some Turkish guy, and I don't control, and he hit me. A lot of hit, 6-7 times by wood, big eucalyptus wood, like 2 meters, that he hide in the mosque.
The blows from the Sudanese prisoner landed Levy in the prison hospital for more than 3 years. While there, tragedy struck. Levy's daughter suffered 3 or 4 strokes.
You feel that your daughter's stroke was because of what had happened to you?
I think so.
Menashe Levy became a cause celeb in Washington, in Jerusalem.
There were American senators, there were Americans everywhere, businessmen, or Jewish organizations, Israeli ministers, the Israeli president.
The campaign was led by the Aleph Institute, an organization to support Jewish prisoners worldwide. Even famed lawyer Alan Dershowitz got involved.
When it comes to a Jew being, or anybody really, being improperly imprisoned, you have to use whatever legal and ethical means are available to you to achieve ultimate justice, which is what I think we did, too late and too little, perhaps, in the Menashe Levy case.
A month ago, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Coming to power last year, Ahmed has built a reputation as a reformer. Netanyahu raised Menashe Levy's case.
The prime minister, who is amazing, when he got the call, he made the call to the prime minister of Ethiopia, which in the end is what brought Menashe home.
And so 3 weeks ago, on July 4th, Menashe Levy walked off the plane onto Israeli soil. Levy is reunited with his daughter, has prayed at the Western Wall as he looks ahead again to life in the Promised Land. Owen Alterman, i24 News.
Well, for more on this story, we welcome to our studio retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Danny Grossman, and from our studios in Jerusalem, Rabbi Shlolom Lipskar, the founder of the Aleph organization. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for your time. Danny, I want to start with you. It seems unfathomable that a person could spend 4 years behind bars for a crime they weren't convicted of. Talk us through how you were involved in this particular case.
Okay, well, I work both for the Aleph Institute, which is an amazing institute which helps people all over the world, both Israelis and Jewish people in America, and even non-Jewish people, deal with their prison experience and try to help them through this. And, of course, I also work with Professor Alan Dershowitz as his strategic point of contact here in Israel. So those two things together. I helped, again, using my Air Force background of, number one, never leaving someone behind in the field, and number two, getting the mission done, and number three, focusing, because the Aleph Institute and many other people, success has a lot of fathers, and in this case there were many people from the president's office, the family, everyone was trying to help, and they were trying to reach out as a cause celeb to everyone, and yet I realized very quickly that it would have to be the prime minister. He would be the only one who could make this happen. And indeed, what happened when Professor Dershowitz was here, he came to meet with the prime minister, as he always does here, for a long strategic meeting on grand issues, without going to Iran, et cetera, what to do. But we said the number one priority issue will be Menashe Levy. We'll talk about that first. And Professor Dershowitz made it clear, telling you this heartbreaking story about this person and making clear to the prime minister that the only thing that would help is if he himself would get personally involved and make the call. And the prime minister was, again, truly amazing. What he did was he made that call, and once he made the call, just within 48 hours, days, Menashe Levy was freed from jail. So I was privileged to help, among many people, engineer that so that would happen, and of course make sure that the call would be made, and thank God it had the predicted effect.
This is where I want to bring in Rabbi Lipskar. Please, will you talk us through the help that your organization provided in terms of helping out in this case? How were you involved?
Generally, our objective is to utilize whatever resources are available to help people in prison, and primarily to avoid whatever prisons they can. As the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who established this organization in 1981, spoke publicly about the fact that of all punishments in the Torah, Bible, the one punishment that is not considered is imprisonment. They have financial consequences. You have sanctioning a perpetrator by putting him to work, so the consequence of his work and the benefits go to the victim. You have corporal punishment. You even have capital punishment, but never prison, because prison is an inhuman type of a punishment where you actually put a person into suspended animation. And the consequence of that, the collateral damage, is vast, as you can see in this case with Menashe himself, where he was personally injured severely, and the more significant collateral damage was the fact that his daughter, a mother of 4 children under the age of 9, suffered multiple strokes as a result of this process. Primarily speaking, you take a man of high-level intelligence, of great capacity and capability, who was able to employ 6,500 people, and you actually tie his life, his arms, his brain, his heart, and put him into an environment that not only is negative to the individual himself, but negative to society. So we take those aspects very seriously, and particularly in this case, where a person was suffering in an environment where he was imprisoned, you might say, without any real indictment that had any kind of truth and credibility in it, as you've heard and as is obviously clear. We took this case very seriously. We presently work in the United States in 400 prisons with approximately 5,000 Jewish men and women, and also their families, and also the general population, and others around the world that come to our attention that we can be helpful. So immediately we put our various connections into play, utilizing, of course, the benefits of the extraordinary jurist Alan Dershowitz, who works very closely with us in helping cases like this, that we have helped, thank God, in many instances, and took this very seriously and moved on it step by step with Danny Grossman and others in our organization, primarily a young man, Lipa, who is very much involved in the international side of the Aleph organization, and pursued it to the extent that we could until we found the absolute final process of his freedom.
Now, I want to bring Danny in here. Excuse me, Rabbi, I'd like to bring Danny in here because I want to find out a little bit more about the meeting. When everything was resolved back here in July, there was a meeting with the Prime Minister. What came out of that?
Well, the meeting was basically an opportunity for Menashe to say thank you. Hakarat hatov, they say in Hebrew, thanking you and recognizing the good that had been done. And in this case, requested to meet with the Prime Minister and thank him personally. But also, we sat with the Prime Minister, and he was extremely gracious, I thought it would be a 5-minute photo op, and he gave about a half hour. He was very interested in hearing about Menashe's story, just like you were asking. How could this happen if you're totally innocent? Well, it seems to be if you succeed in something, you make yourself a target to everybody, and that's basically what happened to Menashe. And he had never been convicted. There never was any conviction given up against him. So the Prime Minister was very interested in this, and also in that meeting itself, which I don't want to talk about what happened exactly to it, but one of the things that came out, as I mentioned, I guess through fate, and the Rabbi will tell you there's no such thing as fate. It's all hashgacha pratit. It's all from the hand of God. But Menashe actually was freed from jail, and it took a little while for him to come back. He landed back here in Israel on the 4th of July this year, which, of course, 4th of July, as I wrote to the ambassador,
a lot of people.
I wrote to Ambassador Friedman, and again, there are many, many people in America, including Ambassador Friedman, who were very key people who were involved. And I said, on the 4th of July, everyone knows America is celebrating its bicentennial, its freedom. And Israelis, back in 1976, as America celebrated its 200th birthday, Israel reminded the world that, as Rabbi mentioned, freedom is a value you have to fight for and stand up for in every generation. So again, it's a little bit ironic this happened on the 4th of July that he came back. Of course, Netanyahu himself has a personal connection with Entebbe, as we all know.
And Rabbi, very briefly, if I could bring you in on the lessons learned.
Well, one thing that was very extraordinary that we found, and of course we're totally apolitical, and this is not dealing with that at all, but in both instances, in the United States and in Israel, what we found is that the leaders of the country, President Trump in a number of cases, that took a personal interest in helping human beings that nobody cared about, and in this instance, Prime Minister Netanyahu that took a similar attitude to helping someone that was, you might say, at the lowest part of his life, at the bottom of the totem pole, that everybody had forgotten about, that had no benefits whatsoever to him personally on any level, but just the fact that they recognized the fact that you need to be able, as a leader of a country, to care even about those that most people forget about. So that was an important lesson for us, recognizing that the actual leadership of the world takes a very significant attitude towards helping those that are downtrodden, which is our philosophy as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Rabbi Shlolom Lipskar for your input, and of course Lieutenant Colonel Danny Grossman. Thank you so much.